In this lesson, we're going to create a reflector type material for things like the inside of the headlamps, the reflectors, the taillights, and things like that. So let's go ahead and start to do this. And to begin with, we're going to start with the headlamp itself. So I've got the front of that hidden. I've got my material editor open. I'm going to start by just creating a polygon selection here of the interior of the headlamp. I'm going to create a new material here. And let's call this reflector white, and into the diffuse I'm going to pipe a cellular. So let's say OK, and that's going to bring up our cellular properties. Let's go ahead and make sure that we apply this, and let's go ahead and if there's a material on there, you can go ahead and replace it. And then we'll go to Views, Show Materials, Standard Display with Maps, and now you get a kind of a visualization of what that's going to look like. Let's go down in our cell characteristics and choose Chips. And that'll give you kind of a sharper, faceted, kind of a stained glass look. And now I'm going to take these division colors and bump these up just a little bit. Same thing with this guy. Okay. I'm going to change the size of this. So let's go ahead and change this down to something like 1. That'll actually modify the size of these so it's a little bit smaller. And it looks a little bit better. All right. I want to go ahead and add a little bit of specular. Okay, make this kind of glossy there. And now I'm going to go into the maps, and I want to add a little bit of self-illumination. Not much, but a little bit, just so it kind of is a little bit brighter. Not really glows, but just kind of stands out a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on self-illumination. I'll set that down to something like 8. And then I'm going to right-click on our map, copy that, and let's paste it into the self-illumination as an instance. Okay. I want to make sure that we go into our actual material and turn on self-illumination. Okay, we also want to add a little bit of reflectivity to this, so I'll turn on reflection, and then I'll pipe a ray trace in there so that it's using the environment. Say OK. And I'm going to take the reflection down to maybe 25 or so. Okay. And now let's say we want to render this, but we don't necessarily want to render the entire thing. Maybe it's going to take a little bit too long. So let's bring up our rendered frame window. And I want to render a region. Okay? And now you'll see the region is available to us here in our render window and also in the viewport. So if I just go in the viewport and decide, well, I want to render this little slice right in here, I can do that. So I've got that selected. I'll simply go to render. And now you'll see that'll begin to render actually inside this box. Let me go ahead and pause as this renders inside there. Alright, so there is our kind of final render. That's actually not too far off from what I'd like. I want to just go in and change this cellular just a little bit more. And I'm going to take this size down to something like maybe 0.8. Okay, and if you'll notice, I just did that once, and now I'll go into this cellular down here, and that's changed as well, and that's because that's an instance. Now I'll go ahead and re-render that with the new values, and go ahead and pause while I do that. And then we get something like that, which is not too bad a result for just doing something procedurally very quickly here in the last few minutes. Now if we want to use this material that we've created as a basis for, go ahead and turn region off, as a basis for the, for instance, the taillights, we can do that as well. So if we go into our material editor, and I'm just going to drag this to a new slot, and let's call this reflector red. Okay, and now I'm going to go into this first diffuse and choose kind of a red color and something kind of bright. You can see how that's going to update in there. And then in our divisions, we'll again choose a red, but this time we'll choose kind of a little bit darker, and this one's going to be fairly dark red. Go ahead and make that kind of a darker red. So something a little bit more like that. Okay, let's go play with the size. I'm going to size this down a little bit in this case to something like 0.5. And then in the material, in the self-illumination, I'm going to dial that down to something like 5. And let's go ahead and apply this to our taillights. All right. And now I want to go in and render a region. Okay, so this time I'm going to render maybe this little area right here. So go ahead and render that up and pause once again. All right, so looking at this, it looks like it's a little bit too reflective right now. So let's go ahead and make a couple of different changes here. We'll take the reflectivity down to something like 10. Okay, let's go into our map here, and let's just dial this down a little bit darker. And in here we can make that maybe a little bit darker as well. Okay, now let's go ahead and re-render that and see how that looks. And again, I'll pause here. And so there we go. We've got something like a red plastic with that kind of cellular look underneath. And if you want to, you can take this same material and reuse it and give it kind of an orange if you want to have maybe those front lights there. Make those kind of an orange and add that kind of cellular. And then you want to repeat that and add it to all the other lights as well, the white one, the white material that we created. All right, so that's a quick way to create kind of a material for our reflector and interior of the headlamps. And the next lesson, we'll set up the tire material and add the tread that we set up with the UV map. We'll add that as a bump and see how that looks. Okay, so we're nearing the end. We'll just keep going just a little bit longer in the next lesson.